those risks have to be captured and highlighted very accurately so that the business impact of those risks is understood, which then impacts, the decisions that those senior level stakeholders need to make. It's action. I've delivered quite a lot of different types of projects using different frameworks such as waterfall, agile, hybrid, and the crucial thing is action, is taking action. It does not matter what framework you use or what tools you use, but if you're not able to grasp the absolute basics of change management and technology implementation and project management, which are being able to track what are the actions coming from usually what is a very back-to-back meeting culture, right? So 10 people can get in a room for 30 minutes, and if there's not a project manager tracking those actions, that's what 300 so 3,000 minutes, so to speak, lost of that organization's time within that half an hour period, if I've done my maths right. And so, I believe you've got to have somebody tracking those actions and then following through with making sure those actions are executed. Now, very much in the change management world, it's a project manager usually is like putting together a really big jigsaw puzzle, right? And you rely on many different stakeholders to help you deliver your implementation or the new technology that's going to be arriving. And usually it involves the project manager to actually influence without authority. So you'll have a lot of different people to coordinate, and you essentially have to get them to do work for you in order to help this implementation of the new technology land. So there is a lot to be said about the soft skills as well, not just the technological tools and frameworks that we use, but the personality, the charm, the charisma of that person as well. Like, how do you get people to deliver work even though they're not directly reporting for you? So I think there is a huge element of of people and your personality, and I say that because the tools and the frameworks, I think now it's almost driven by the personality of the individual that comes into doing that job. So as a project manager, I'm not, when I'm hiring project managers, I'm not looking at what I know what tools or technologies and frameworks they can use, but ultimately I kind of expect them to already have that in their back pocket from their experience. So the tools and frameworks, it's down to them, like whichever framework they want to use, whether it's agile, whether it's waterfall, or hybrid, which at the moment it's very, very common for large scale enterprises. Because there isn't that one size fits all, right? Every organization is different, and within every organization, all the teams are different, different personalities. So it's very much dependent for me on that project manager's personality traits. And so for me, I think provided the person and the personality I know has some charisma and charm and will be able to work with quite a lot of different people, whether they use the agile methodology, whether they use waterfall framework, it's down to that person, I believe. But the key thing, as I mentioned at the beginning of this answer, was that project manager has to be able to execute the actions and track them very well. So it's all about action-focused delivery. For me, it's about, again, communication and understanding that change management framework. And as I mentioned, I think on a previous answer, it's a bit about being a bridge between the technical delivery teams and the non-technical senior management audience. And one of the key skills for me in being that bridge is being able to create documentation and reports. Now, my chosen weapon, which I think is the best thing since sliced bread, is PowerPoint. And I believe in very simple one-pager documents whereby you're able to get the updates that you need, the status reporting updates from the technical delivery teams through, let's say, your daily stand-ups, and then be able to articulate and communicate those in very simple one-pager for the senior management audience, who, as we know, are very, very short on time, and they need to be able to analyze, quite a lot of information very quickly in order to make it, in order for them to make those decisions. So I believe in being able to understand, the technical delivery risks being highlighted by the delivery team, and then you, as the project manager or program manager, being the person who can then articulate those, into pretty pictures that are then, mapped back to, let's say, the business outcomes, or the risks associated to those outcomes. So, one of the key things with helping to make decisions is that cybersecurity usually and very often it's a cost center, right? We're not a revenue generating function of a business. However, we do defend and mitigate those risks of losses and operational downtime as well from attacks or cyber attacks. And so it's being able to then understand the technical languages that the technical delivery teams, the solution design architects, the technical subject matter experts, the business analysts, the delivery team are highlighting to you in your, let's say, daily stand-up. And then perhaps you have either a weekly update or a fortnightly update with your senior level audience. But all of that is mapped on, a one-page document, which paints the entire picture, like a very clear status report, let's say, which shows the senior level audiences what the project scope is, how that's tracking, what the schedule is looking like, the project plan, how are we performing against the budget that's been allocated to the project. Even also the team and the resources being allocated, do we have enough people to deliver the latest implementation? So you're tracking all of that. So, I've developed quite a lot of these internal templates that I guess I'd like to think I've mastered over the last 15 years or so, which really allow me to, report very complicated technical cybersecurity information into very simple, pretty pictures that allow, the critical identification of risks, and then the audiences that need to make the decisions, to be able to just look at those one pages and instantly make those decisions very quickly, within a very short space of time. So strong. So, to summarize, Megan, I think it's very strong governance, and also having very strong reporting templates for those different audiences. Transparency. I think I have a saying, which is always deliver bad news fast. That is the absolute critical thing. It's great when things are going well, and we want to report good news. But for me, it's being able to identify those technical delivery risks within the, and again, I mentioned the daily stand-ups that I have been sharing, for the last 15 years or so, and being able to identify those and then, communicating those risks, instantly. It's much better to, over communicate bad news than it is to sort of sit on it and not let you inform your stakeholders of the risks. And then that those risks are also then part of the decision-making process that we spoke about in the previous question, is that those risks have to be captured and highlighted very accurately so that the business impact of those risks is understood, which then impacts the decisions that those senior level stakeholders need to make. And so always deliver bad news fast. And then again, it does go back to being able to articulate and track those risks, into those very clean, crisp one pages that I've been creating sort of over the years, which then allows those non-technical leaders to be able to very clearly understand, complicated technical delivery risks. And there are multiple different types of risks as well, Megan, that you as a project manager, it's your duty to identify those, right? So as well as having like technical delivery risks, there are risks to the project plan, the schedule, and the milestones. There can also be risks to your resources and the people in your team. Maybe somebody who's a critical sort of single point of success or single point of failure, whichever way you want to call it. Maybe they're resigning, and a replacement can't be found. So a massive, perhaps an operating model piece of work that they were assigned to do is now at risk of not being delivered. So there's resource risks, there's costs risks always. Everyone's always trying to deliver implementations as cheaply and as cost effectively as possible. So again, a program manager or a project manager needs to be able to have a very close eye on the financial forecast as well. So there are all these multiple different types of risks that have to be managed and reported upwards. And I put all those kind of risks into project risks. These are things you can mitigate, you can accept and do something about, so you have a bit more control over them. But then there's something which we don't have any control about, which is like market risk, and that is usually we accept those risks provided they're articulated, and then stakeholders, decision makers are happy to proceed with the implementation of that project based on knowing those risks. So there's quite a few different types of risks that a program manager should be aware of, and then be able to articulate those, whether they're delivery project risks or whether they're market risks, and then be able to continue to deliver that project. The speech isn't about me. Every speech I deliver is absolutely not about me. Like, I'm there, based on my experience and helping to structure the talk that I'm giving. But for me, it's always about the audience. Like, I want the audience to be able to walk away having learned something from what I'm presenting. Whether it's one key takeaway. I hope it's a lot more than just the one. But as long as the audience can take away some real, action-orientated delivery steps that I will always present. So for me, it's being able to walk away, having learned something new, but then actually, being informed and educated that on something that they can actually, start implementing straight away. So my talks are very much, I try to put in as many how-to sections in there, whether it's a 15-minute slot or a half-an-hour slot, whatever I'm allocated to, I'll always put in some sort of a workshop on how to create something. So it might be like, how to create the weekly status report that we just touched on, how to create one of those one pages I was just alluding to, how to create a project plan, how to create an actions tracker. So there will always be these how-to steps that I would, and I always do, put into my talk, so that the audience can walk away, not just having information thrown at them, but real actionable templates and tools that they can start implementing straight away.